Hello everyone. My name is Daichi Kokubun. I'm a first year PhD student at Tokyo University of Agriculture and Technology. Today, I will introduce the main characteristics of forestry in Japan and compare them with New Zealand. First, I will introduce Japan's forest resource. Next, I will explain four challenges facing Japanese forestry. Then I will compare forest laws, harvesting systems, and machine size in Japan and New Zealand. Finally, I will summarize the main feature of Japanese forestry. This figure compares the forest area and forest types in Japan and New Zealand. Japan has about 25 million hectares of forest. Forests cover about 66% of the country. About half of Japan's forests are natural forests, and around 40% are plantation forests. Japan's plantation forests include several major species, such as Japanese cedar and Japanese cypress. New Zealand has about 10 million hectares of forest. Forests cover about 38% of the country. About 80% of New Zealand's forests are native forests, while plantation forests account for about 20%. Most plantation forests in New Zealand are larger pine. Compared with Japan, New Zealand has a higher percentage of native forest and lower percentage of plantation forest. This slide compares the age structure of plantation forest in Japan and New Zealand. Japan is shown in blue. The distribution peaks at the age class 12. This means that many trees are around 56 to 60 years old. A large share of Japan's plantation forest has reached harvesting age. However, harvesting and replanting have not kept pace. New Zealand is showing orange. Most plantations are less than about 35 years old. The two countries grow different tree species and use different harvesting cycles. Therefore, some difference in age structure is expected. The main point is that Japan has abundant mature forest resources. However, these forests are not being harvested and renewed enough. A large share of Japan's plantation forest is now mature. However, these forests can cause severe problems if they are not properly managed. Dense trees canopies block sunlight and reduce vegetation on the forest floor. This may increase the risk of soil erosion. Hay fever is also a serious problem. Almost 1 in 2 people in Japan has a pollen allergy. In addition, very large logs are difficult to transport. Some Japanese sawmills cannot process them. So why is harvesting not progressing in Japan? I think Japan faces 4 major challenges in forestry. First, many forests are located on steep and complex terrain. Second, the forest road network is still limited. Third, forest ownership is small and fragmented. Finally, there is a serious shortage of forestry workers. Let's look at each challenge in more details. Both Japan and New Zealand conduct forestry on steep terrain. However, their landforms are different. In the Japanese example on the left, many narrow ridges and deep valleys are concentrated within a small area. In the New Zealand example on the right, the slope and ridges are broader and more continuous. New Zealand also has complex terrain. However, broader slopes can make it easier to move machines and set up cable systems. Japan's complex landforms affect the planning of forest road networks and harvesting systems. This graph compares forest road density in 3 countries. Germany has more than 100 meters of forest roads per hectare. Austria also has more than 80 meters per hectare. Both countries have well-developed forest road networks. In contrast, Japan has only about 25 meters per hectare. This shows that Japan's forest road network is still relatively limited. Next, let's look at the size of forest ownership. The left graph shows the share of forestry entities in Japan by forest area. Many Japanese forestry entities manage less than 10 hectares. Small and fragmented forest ownership is key feature of Japan. The right graph shows New Zealand plantation forest area by owner size. The two graphs use different measures, so we can't compare them directly. However, we can see a general difference. In New Zealand, large owners manage a large share of the plantation forest area. Next, let's look at the forestry workforce. The green graph shows the number of forestry workers in Japan. This number has continued to decline. In 2020, Japan had about 44,000 forestry workers. The red line shows the share of workers aged 65 or older. In forestry, this share is about 25%. This means that 1 in 4 forestry workers is aged 65 or older. Therefore, securing the further forestry workforce is a serious challenge for Japan. Japan has a large areas of mature forest. However, it is difficult to use these resources efficiently. The main challenges are steep terrain, limited forest roads, small and fragmented forest ownership, and shortage of workers. Next, I will explain forest laws in Japan. Forest laws are foundation of mechanized forestry. This slide compares forest law types and weights in Japan and New Zealand. Many forest laws in Japan are only 3 to 4 meters wide. In New Zealand, some forest laws are up to 9 meters wide. This large difference affects the size of machine and the type of harvesting systems that can be used. This is a typical ground-based harvesting system in Japan. On steep slopes, machines cannot reach the trees. Therefore, workers fell them with chainsaws. A machine pulls the felled trees to the forest road, where they processed into logs. It is difficult to build large processing area in Japanese forest. Therefore, processing is often carried out on narrow forest roads, as shown in the picture. Finally, the logs are loaded onto a forwarder and transported to a landing. Ground-based harvesting systems are widely used in Japan. However, on steep slopes, workers still often fell trees manually with chainsaws. Manual tree felling is dangerous. In 2024, 21 workers lost their lives during tree felling operations. In New Zealand, fully mechanized systems are used on steep terrain. Winch assist machines are used for mechanized felling, and cable yarding systems are also well developed. Mechanization is important for improving worker safety. However, Japan's complex terrain makes further mechanization difficult. This slide compares machine size and working space in Japan and New Zealand. In Japan, relatively small machine sizes of around 8 to 12 tons often operate on narrow roads with limited workspace. In New Zealand, larger machines of around 30 tons can operate on wider roads and larger landings. However, Japan's steep and complex terrain make it difficult to build wide roads and large landings, or to use large machines. Therefore, Japan needs to develop forest road networks and mechanized harvesting systems that are suited to Japan terrain. To conclude, Japan has abundant and mature plantation forest resources. However, complex terrain, fragmented forest ownership, limited road access, and a shortage of workers make efficient operations difficult. These conditions require relatively small machines and flexible harvesting systems. New Zealand provides useful examples of road planning, harvesting planning, and safer mechanization. Japan cannot simply copy New Zealand systems. Instead, we need to adapt this idea to Japan's conditions. By developing forest road networks and a mechanized system suited to Japan terrain, we can improve both safety and productivity in Japanese forestry. Thank you for listening.